but on my prior year sales, I'm going to change this to be a Gantt bar. And then let's see, I can get rid of the sales increase there. Maybe I'll make these blacks are a bit easier to see. And now I can control the width of that line. So if I wanted to look like a reference line, I could just make that as big as it goes. But if I only wanted to go partway across the bar, I could just shrink this down. And now I have a different way of showing how I compare to the prior year. So lots of options when you use a second axis. Okay, I know I'm going really fast, but I think that was kind of the point, right? So now we're going to look at maybe a combination chart. So a combination chart looks at, it has two different chart types, maybe a bar chart on one axis and a line chart on the other axis. So I'm going to, let's see, I'll just look at, let's just look at maybe, I'll just look at month. And we're going to look at revenue as a bar. So let's make that a bar chart. And then we might want to look at profit on the second axis this time. Before we looked at it as a combined axis, I want to synchronize. And then I'm going to go ahead and change the mark type to a line, right? So now we can see how they, the trends for both of them at the same time as different chart types. Now, sometimes you'll see people not synchronize. And what that does is it kind of helps the line go up to the top, which it makes it a bit easier to compare the patterns, I guess, of the two lines. The problem here, though, is that people might not see that the scales are different on the two measures, and they might assume that profit and sales are much closer than they really are. So just be careful when you use a dual axis, when you use a combination chart like this with two different measures, that you need to make a careful decision on whether you want to synchronize or not. Okay. Okay, so let's look again at, we're going to now look at another bar chart. I know you're probably getting tired of bar charts, but you know, so be it. We want to look at, what I want to look at now is, where am I now? I lost my spot again. Yeah, I want to look at the deviation to my average. So for example, if I put revenue here and I drag on a reference line, let's just drag on an average reference line. So my average is, what's that, like 1.3 million. I want to see how much each of these each month compares to that average. Now to do that, I need to create a calculation that returns the average. So if I edit this calculation, the easiest way you can turn any reference line into a calculation with a really, really simple step. So what I'm going to do is I'll show you how to do it. So all you have to do is put the word window here, if you think about it like that. So window underscore. So I'm going to write my window average of my sum of revenue, and that's going to be my reference line. So that one is super handy as well. Let me escape. There we go. So keep that in your head there. So I'm going to create a new calculated field. I'll call this my, I'm going to call it my window average sales, just so I remember what calculation it is. So again, I did window average, and then I'm just going to drag in my sum of revenue. Click on OK, and to show you that it's the same value, I'll drag it into the view. And this one is you see it's the same number going all the way across, 1.28 million. My reference line is the same. Okay, great. So now that we have that, we can compare each month to that average. So let's create a new calculated field, and I'll call this variance to average. To average. And I'm going to look at my revenue minus my window average sales. Click on OK. And let's put that in the view now. And we can get rid of the other two fields. And if we now make this bars, we can see how everything compares to that average. So the baseline now is 0, and we're looking everything compared to 0. So let's drag that also onto color. I like to just accentuate it a bit more. And there we go. So this is our deviation. We could also do it as a line if you prefer. So if I duplicate this, I can make it a line chart. Maybe I'll get rid of the color in this case. But again, I find this one a bit harder to read. I think the area chart's easier to understand. So what I would do in this case is I would format the view, And I would make my 0 line probably like thicker and maybe make it like a dark color to make it obvious that that's what you're trying to compare to. You could color code the lines as well. So if I just drag the variance on the color again, and but again, I think the bar chart is significantly easier to understand than this line chart is. Okay, do you want me to keep going, by the way?
How are we doing, folks? Yes, please.
Okay. Oh, since you said please, okay. So now we're gonna look at something called a cycle plot. So earlier we looked at, let's just say we looked at monthly sales, something like this, right? And this shows us the trend across the trend of the months within each year. But let's say I want to compare all of the Januaries to each other. So I want to see how January is performing 2020 versus 21 versus 22 versus 23. So that's what's called a cycle plot. So I'm going to actually just swap around the month and the year. And now I can see the trends. So I can see January of 2020 was my best performing January. August, it looks like something's been going on with August over the years. And then something else you should add on to this is an average line for each pane. Now this time I'm choosing pane because I want it to be each of the sections going down. So a pane in this case is defined by my months. And now I can see kind of how I am above and below the average across the 4 years. So that's called a cycle plot. Sometimes I call it a psychoplot. Okay, now we're going to look at a quick calendar heat map. And I'll give you a, next week, I'm going to put out a tip that shows you how to use dynamic zone visibility to drill down from a yearly calendar to a monthly calendar. But let's just do a monthly calendar here. So I'm going to drag purchase date. Let's just look at an individual year, an individual year and month. So to do a calendar, we have weekdays going across. So just close your eyes and picture a calendar in your head. And then down the left-hand side, we have the week numbers. So let's right-click and drag purchase date. Let's do our week numbers. And I always like to have the day in the upper right-hand side. So I'm going to drag purchase date to the text and choose my day number. And then align that on the upper right. And maybe make the font smaller. Oops. Let's maybe make the font and if you want a font that's not in there, you can just type a number in. And let's say I want to look at profit, so I'll put profit on color. And because I have something on text, Tableau just colors the numbers. So I need to change my mark type from automatic to a square. And then I will hide my header for my week. And I'm also going to take it out of the tooltip. I don't really need my weekday in the tooltip either. So now it just says day of purchase date 1. So I actually want that to be the date. So I'm going to uncheck that. And now I'm just going to drag my purchase date onto the detail and pick purchase date discrete. Now when I hover over, I can see the date and the profit for that day. So that's a calendar heat map. And let's see. Do you want me to show you how the drill down works? I can just show you a little GIF of it. Let me see here. I have it here. I might have lied to you. Okay, forget it. Pretend I didn't say that. Anyway, you can probably picture it in your head. So that's our calendar heat map, and I like those because you can quickly see where there's issues. Okay. So we did that.
Would you be able to take in a couple of questions if we have any?
I guess. I haven't gotten to the cool charts yet, but that's okay.
Eliminated everybody, I think. But does anybody have a question for Andy?
I have a question.
Okay, yeah.
A while before you did a graph with a 13-week moving average. And I was just curious why you picked that, if that was a common way to look at like overtime data.
So 13 weeks, you mean? Why did I pick 13? Is that what you mean, like the number 13 specifically?
Yeah.
Because usually, so that's a pretty common one to use because 13 weeks is a quarter. So it's kind of like a moving quarter.
Got it.
Sometimes you'll see 26 weeks, sometimes you'll see 52. That will just smooth those would just smooth the line out a bit more. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could do something like we could say let's call this number of weeks, and maybe I'll give them a list of let's see, 13, 26, and 52. So I'm just going to create a parameter to let them pick how many number of weeks they want to show in that. So then I'm just going to edit this calculation and I'll call it my N week moving average. And so when I did 13 weeks, I had to make this 12, right? If you remember the little window. So if I want this to be, I want the user to pick 13, but I need to offset this by 1. So I need to take that number and subtract 1. So I'm going to put in my my parameter here, number of weeks, and I'm going to add 1 to that. So if they pick 13 for the parameter, it's going to do no, I want to do it the other way around. 13 minus 1. There we go. So it would be no, it was plus 1. Oh Christ. So it would be minus 13 plus 1 gets me to that minus 12 number. I don't want my users to have to know like what number to type in a 12 or something like that. What's going on here? Okay, and I'm getting an error because my parameter is a float. But so let me edit my parameter. This needs to be an integer. And then that should work. So now I can let my users decide what level they want to do it at. I could put a 0 in there as well, and then it would just be like your daily sales. Or weekly sales, sorry, something like that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great.
Got
Any
another
others?
question?
I didn't have a question, just a comment, because usually with what he did up there with above or below the reference line, I usually write an if statement or a case statement, but using Booleans for that is genius, and I just learned that today.
Yeah,
Such
good.
an easier approach to it if you just want to know above or below.
Yeah, and Booleans calculate much faster as well than an if statement will. So if you're worried about performance, always use Booleans. Computers eat Booleans are just zeros and ones, which is like cereal for computers. Any other questions? I didn't get to 50, but I can stop. I can stop if you want.
Well, just want to make sure we have time for Jay, who's waiting
Yeah.
in the wings.
Okay.
We do one more question for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Andy, so you've clearly gone through a number of Tableau iterations or software upgrades. How do you keep track of what new features are there, or like how do you learn the new features? Do you just dive right into the new versions?
Well, I usually have access to the beta, so I'll look at that and I read through what the new features are supposed to be. So I'll kind of play with them ahead of time usually. If not, if I don't have the chance, I always just look at the release notes. So, and you can get those. Let's see, how can I do this here? Where's my Chrome? Yeah. So if I go to, where is it? Tableau. I think it's under coming soon, maybe. Check out our latest release. And then they'll usually have all of the features listed as you go through. Yes, if you scroll down, you get more and more features that they've implemented. And then I think you can go back. Is it? No. I thought there was a way to go back previous versions.
Yeah, it's right there in the bottom right.
Bottom right. All releases. Here we go. Okay, there you go. So you can just look back at the previous ones, right? Okay. If you want to see all of those, so get through the whole 60-ish, if you go out to my blog, there is so if you go to viswiz.com and you go down a few, there's a blog, and then has a YouTube video in there, and that's me to make it feel like I have an angel halo. But yeah. And you can just follow along. Okay.
One tour of charts. But we will absorb on that, and we thank you so much for coming and presenting for us.
Yeah, my
Appreciate it.
pleasure. I'm trying to figure out how to stop sharing. But it's not letting, oh, and here we go. I need to switch screens. Okay, there we go. I think I'm off the screen now.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you so much. Can we have a round of applause for Andy?
Thank you.
Nothing else that proves there are people here.
Yeah, exactly. There's still nobody there. You were just using different voices. It's 9 p.m. here, so I'm gonna get going and have some dinner. But thank you for having me. Hopefully everybody enjoyed that.
We
Good
did.
luck, Jay.
Very much so. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Okay. All right. Bye.
All right. That was a lot to absorb. We will hopefully let that marinate for a little bit. We'll come back to talking about time series towards the end. But next up, we have another presenter. I'm not sharing, am I? Oh, technology. Well, it doesn't matter. It's a slide that says the title and his name. I'll just tell you. So next up, we have Jay Farias, who is a consultant with Action Analytics. And he is going to be talking about dates and date calculations and how to do some of those more complex things to show. So Andy showed us a few calculations of dates. Jay's going to go even a little bit deeper. So, Jay, let me pin you if I can find your name here. I see you. There we go. All right, and let me pin. All right, and Jay is going to tell us a little bit more about himself before he dives into the calcs. So there you go, Jay. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jack. Everybody hear me?
Yep.
All right. Yeah, so I'm going to start sharing and talk a little bit about myself. Yeah, so my name is Jay. I'm an analytics strategist at Action Analytics, where I also help lead our small boutique consultancy. So we specialize in everything data, mainly focusing on analytics strategy, Tableau development, Alteryx development. So if your org needs any help in those areas, feel free to reach out. I've been in Tableau pretty much every day now for the last 6 years, and in consulting for 5 of them. I really enjoy the diversity and the challenges in consulting. I have an engineering degree, and so I was initially drawn to the technical side of Tableau, but I've since focused on improving my design skills as I get more comfortable with subjective areas in my life. You know, when I was younger, that was kind of scary, being very black and white, but I'm getting more comfortable with that. I still really enjoy figuring out complex logic in Tableau, and then I give a lot of these tutorial style presentations at Tableau user groups. I help lead the Kansas City one, so I speak there a few times a year. So, all right, on to the good stuff. Play date with Tableau. So I'm going to be talking about dates, which is the theme for today. So I'll be doing a quick review of basic Tableau date features, which Andy pretty well covered them. So I'll kind of breeze through those. And then I'll dive into how to create year-over-year comparison charts using the date equalizing method. So that's really like the bulk of my presentation is going to be deep diving in how you get year-over-year lines on each other. And along the way, I'll also show how to implement some custom date filters and dynamic date axis aggregation. And lastly, I'll demo some more advanced custom period over period date comparison development. So this presentation is actually one that my old team at my last consultancy, Evolytics, gave at a Kansas City Tug last year. So it has been modified from its original version, formatted to fit this screen, and edited for content. I'll credit the original authors as we go through. And then feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and I'll review them at the end. All right, date features. So this was originally composed by Leah O'Rourke, so I want to give her credit. So Andy covered this, but we can look at dates 2 ways, discrete or continuous. These 2 charts actually show the same exact data, right? This is 4 years of data at the same aggregation of month, but they look very different. This is because the discrete view is looking at a specific date part, the month, and then grouping by that month if we want to talk SQL, regardless of the year. While the continuous view is looking at the entire date value, grouping by month and year, and sorting oldest to newest. And then continuous is automatically going to chart a line, and discrete is going to chart a bar by default. And he touched on this as well. Discrete is going to draw headers to get your bars, and then continuous green pills are going to draw axes. And he did touch this too. He took my tip. This is really helpful when working with dates. You know, on a Mac, you can option drag to your shelf, or on Windows, you can right click and drag to your shelf, and you get this menu to pick the exact granularity and either discrete or continuous that you want. And this is really helpful with especially large data sets. Okay, so getting into date functions, let's cover a few common ones, especially these are the ones I'm going to use in the tutorial coming up. This was also developed by Leah. So the date add function, and this is the function to use when you guessed it, you're going to need to add dates together. And the three I'm going to cover all take date part functions, arguments of seconds up through years. So you can get, you know, time through years in these. And then date diff. So this helps us find the distance between two dates. And note this function works by subtracting the start date from the end date. And so you might have your dates switched around if you get a negative value in return when you put them in here. It took me a while to get to, like, you know, which one's coming first, which one do I put first? So it's start date and then end date, and then you'll get a positive number in return. You kind of see the examples here that we have using date diff with order date and ship date in the sample superstore data set. Date trunc. So this truncates the specified date to the date part you pick and returns a new date. So for example, a date trunc of month will always return the first of the month. So a date trunc of 5/7 is going to return 5/1. A date trunc of 6/13 is going to return 6/1. And by default, a date trunc of week will return whatever date was on a Sunday of the original date, right? So today's September 21st. What was Sunday, like the 19th or 18th or something? So it would return like Sunday's date. So you get a week beginning. And you can modify this. That's just the Tableau default setting. So you can change that, I think, somewhere. Or you can just manually add dates to get, if you want week ending instead of week beginning, or if you want a Wednesday or whatever, you can just add the number of days. So these are the three main functions I want to highlight. But there are a bunch more in Tableau. You have like date name, date parse, date part, max and min. So these are very useful for finding the latest or earlier dates in your data set. The max function is crucial in the date equalizer set of calculations that I'm about to review. There's also individual date part calculations for year, quarter, month, week, and day, along with today and now functions if you want to get the date, the current date, or the current time. There are also ISO date functions, but these can only be used with an extract. And I'm not sure about the make date and make date time. I think those might also be only used with an extract. So you can put integers into that formula, into that function, and it'll give you a date in return, which is pretty handy. Kind of the opposite of parse, you know, splitting them apart, you're putting them back together. All right. Okay. So now let's get into equalized year-over-year comparisons. So this was originally done by Liam Huffman. So I want to give credit to him. Year-over-year sales performance. So use case, let's say you need to visualize year-over-year comparison of sales data, but out of the box, there's not really a way to overlay trends using a continuous date axis. So we can use a discrete date aggregation like week number, which I've shown in this screenshot. And we can put year on color, but you're limited to numerical week numbers or days. So notice at the bottom, it goes from week number 1 to week number 53. Like there's no, you don't get like, you know, January 8th is the second week of the year. So this is going to be discrete. We can see the blue pill up there. And the same thing with days. You'll get 1 through 31 if you put discrete day up there. So we can do month, and it'll actually give us the month name, which is nice. It doesn't give us 1 through 12. It gives us the actual month names. But again, there's no way to get weeks or days. So this can be helpful if this is all you need. When we do chart continuous, the date labels are better. You know, we get the actual dates as it goes along, but we lose that overlaying feature that allows us for a direct comparison, you know, one year on top of the other. So we can kind of work with this, you know, if we don't do anything fancy, we can, you know, use a year on rows to separate out our years. Get a continuous axis. We can kind of see how it goes along, and then we can, you know, use some functionality to show specific dates and changes and stuff like that. But it's not a great user experience. It's really hard to compare these. So our solution is to equalize the dates. Now, equalizing dates means we're going to create a new date column that brings all the prior year dates into the current year. We're also going to create a dimension that we can use to then separate them. So I'll show you how to do this along with adding a few other features like creating a selector for viewing by different date aggregations, by day, by week, by month. You can do a quarter as well. We can toggle between comparing the same day of the week, like this Thursday to the same Thursday last year, or by the same day of the month. So like the 21st of September to the 21st of September, because last year this Thursday was not the 21st, it was the 22nd. So we need to determine in our analysis which one of those we want to use. And also we'll create parameters for selecting a custom date range to view. So they can just manually enter in, and we'll add some cool features to those as well. So let's get started. The first step is to create a column giving us the latest date in the data set. So we'll need this for multiple applications. And it's best practice to use a date in your data set versus the today function in case there's a data latency or a refresh issue. If your extract fails, you don't want the dates to keep moving, but you actually have no data. You want to anchor your max date to a date in your data set. So it's this simple fixed level of detail statement across the whole data set, just the max order date. We're going to get the same value in every single row in this column for the whole table. And next, we need to create a field classifying every date value as either a date in the current year, a date in the prior year, a date in the prior year, however far back you want to go. And we return integers here to utilize in a downstream calculation. So it's simply, year of order date equals the max date, the year of the max date. Oh, then that's 0, that's the current. If the year of the order date equals the year of the max order date minus 1, then that's 1 year back, and then 2 years back, 3 years back. So here we can see the max order date and the CYPY fields in action. So I've selectively filtered a few dates to show the CYPY assignments. So we can see the max order date is going to be the same value all the way across. So then you can do row level calculations because you have that 6/26/2022 for this data set is on the same row as all your other dates. And we can see when we get down to like 6/26/2021, we get a CYPY of 1. And we go back to 6/26/2020, we get a CYPY of 2. So it's 2 years back. All right, next we need to create a parameter for toggling between comparing weekdays versus calendar days when we're viewing at the day level. So when we compare at the week or month level, we'll be using calendar days to ensure apples to apples. So in this parameter, we'll return values of 364 or 365. So 364 for comparing the same day of the week, or 365 for comparing the same calendar date. And again, we're returning integers because we want to directly use those in calculations later. So I'll show how these work to equalize dates on a calendar in a moment. But first, let's put them into our date equalizer equation. So we use that date add function, right, that leverages the parameter and the CYPY fields we just created. So this calculation simply just multiplies either 364 or 365, whatever's in our daily comparison against, by the number of years from our CYPY assignment. The target date is to the same current date, and then adds it back to the order date, to the target date. So this is going to equalize it with the same date in the current year. It's much easier to see in a table or calendar. So let's go ahead and look at that. But this is the calculation we create with our calculated fields. So this table shows a few dates that have been equalized. So let's look at the current year date of June 26, 2022, which is our max date in this data set. So this falls on a Sunday. And we can see in the calendars to the right that the equivalent weekday of Sunday in 2021 is actually June 27th, right? And then June 28th in 2020. So we need to add 364 days to June 27th to get it to equal June 26th, 2022. And thus show the same day of the week. If we wanted to compare calendar date, we would take June 26, 2021 and add 365 days. But then, we're looking at a Saturday. We're comparing a Saturday to a Sunday. And if we go back another year, we're comparing a Friday to a Sunday. So for you doing like anything marketing based, usually you don't want to do this, or like, you're going to have cyclical metrics for usage and stuff like that. So notice these calculations don't don't take into account leap years. You can factor that in, but it's beyond the scope of this presentation. You can Google that if you need to. You get to use the modulo function. It's kind of fun. You can also achieve all of this the manipulation with a date dimension table, which I highly recommend if this is going to be common throughout your organization. And they're also very helpful if you have fiscal year date scenarios. So those can get kind of messy. It's just easier to join into a date dimension table, get the fiscal, the equivalent fiscal year date, the week number, the month number, all that kind of stuff. So check with senior analysts, data engineers, or your managers to see if there's a date dimension table that already exists at your org. All right. So we can put our date equalizer on columns up here, and then we can put sales on rows, and we can put our year of order date on color, and then we get this nice overlaying year-over-year chart. And it looks like everything's working as intended, and we can toggle between calendar day and weekday and see, those days shift just a little bit depending on if we're adding 364 or adding 365. All right, so let's add some more functionality to this. We can create a date aggregation parameter that allow us to change the level of detail of the dates. So this is a string parameter where the values are intentionally lowercase again, because we'll be using them in a calculation later on. So we're just going to put, we want to look at day, do we want to look at week, do I want to look at month? So to implement this aggregation parameter, we can either edit our original date equalizer calc or just create a new one for simplicity. So for the day aggregation, again, we want to incorporate the user's choice of weekday or calendar date. So we need to write a case statement to allow for this. For the other date aggregations, week and month, I've opted to always use the calendar date by adding 365. So for month, I think this always makes sense. You're always going to want to compare, like September 1st through September 30th for every single year. But for week, it's debatable. We're going to get a 7-day period that always has 2 weekend days and 5 weekdays. But, holidays might fall in different weeks. So it just depends on your analysis. If you want to use 364 or 365 for weeks, you'll just have to do some testing and see how it works. But case statement, days, we're going to add days, 365. For weeks, we're going to truncate with the week, the date aggregation. So showing this, we've added that aggregation, adds a little bit more functionality. We can go from day to week, and then we can see month as well. So you can also add quarter here, which is really popular. I've just done those 3. You can add different ones, which I'll show in the next presentation or next section. All right, so I've also been showing screenshots of filtered date ranges to keep the focus on the functionality. But if you're going to use the out-of-the-box date filters, you may run into the issue of prior year dates extending past the current year max date, right? Because we have data. So if today's September 21st, we only have data up through now for this year, but we have data from all of last year. So that's going to show on your charts. So this may be beneficial if you want to see what the expected performance will be, but it might also be distracting. So to mitigate this, we can implement a future date filter with a simple Boolean calculation. Is the date equalizer less than or equal to the max order date? And we just put it on our future date or our filter shelf, and then we can see that trail of pink and blue kind of disappear, and then we have the same 3 overlaying lines for all of it. So it just depends on your analysis and what you want to do. All right, so custom date range parameters can add even more functionality to your viz. So to do that, we need to first create a start date parameter. And this is just going to be a simple date type. And then to truly create a great user experience, we can leverage the dynamic default value by also implementing a min start date field that is relative to our max order date. So this is kind of similar to Andy's last 13 weeks. You could do a similar thing here. I've done 30 days here, but you could do 180 days so that when the dashboard opens up, the minimum start date is always 180 days ago. So it's just this relative moving anchor that you have in your dashboard. It's got to be an LOD, right, to use for the default for this. When workbook opens, it's got to be the same value throughout the entire data set. So we'll do the same thing for our end date parameter, and we can just use the max order date field because that's already an LOD for the dynamic end date, right? So then the end date is always just the latest date in our data set, and the beginning date is how many days back we want. And then to implement these, we just create a simple calculation with the date equalizer chunk and the parameters. So, date equalizer is less than or equal to the start date, and it's greater than or equal to the start date and less than or equal to the end date. All right, so we can put all this together and make a pretty slick dashboard that shows the year-over-year sales with custom functionality and provide a great user experience. So I'm gonna switch over to Tableau and just demo this a little bit, show you what I've got. So this is our day view, right? We were currently comparing weekday, and we can toggle the calendar day and see it shift, see that line shift over just a little bit. We can go to week for a little bit better view. I've also got some hover actions in here. So like if you hover over a specific date in your trend chart, the bar charts on the right will filter. So you can see the exact values on that date and then the percent changes that happen. I've also got functionality. If you hover on a bar on the right, then it's going to highlight that year over here on the left. So it just adds a little bit better user experience. We can go to month, not that much data in here, but then also got these custom date parameters, right? So we can see, let's go through August instead. Oh, might not have data in here. I might have trimmed the data set. Yeah, we can go back a little bit. Yeah, so here's the demo of the dashboard. And then I have used dynamic zone visibility to kind of hide this, which is really nice. You could do that before. It was kind of a pain in the ass, but now with dynamic zone, it's great. It's so much easier. Right. Okay, so let's go a little bit more advanced. So the last thing I'd like to show you is a demo of some custom period over period date comparisons. So this is a brief overview of the presentation I gave in that tug on dates. I'm not going to show you how to build any of this. It's just going to be kind of what's possible. So this use case actually stemmed from a challenge I had via client. So they weren't concerned with year over year, but rather they wanted just recent trend comparisons in different ways. So they wanted week over week, but they wanted week ending. And then they wanted month to date, so comparing September 21st to August 21st to July 21st, like what has happened up through then. And then also just custom rolling periods. So the last 30 days compared to the previous 30 days compared to the previous 30 days. So that was like every day it was rolling, or you could change that to 7 or 15 or whatever. So that one was pretty complicated, but it was really fun. And it was also something that they were not really able to do in the database because they'd have to do, it would just take up way too much space. But in Tableau, with how dynamic it is, I was able to achieve this, and they were really happy. So let's see this. So this is the dashboard. I'm not going to go into detail, but you can actually YouTube search for Kansas City Tableau user group June 2022. And that presentation goes into all the calculations that are behind this. The dashboard is also on Tableau Public, along with the one I just showed you, the date equalizer. So feel free to download those and sift through the calcs, copy them out, use them. So I'm just going to highlight some main features to show you what's possible here. So right now I have it set for rolling end days, right? So you can, right now it's 7 days. Let's say we wanted to see the last 30 days. It'll give us that. And so this data set stops at, well, I've like already dynamically updated the data, so it always is today's date. But 9/21/2023, 30 days ago is 8/22, 30 days from that, 7/23. So let's actually see the last 180 days. I can change this show last number of periods to be how many period bins I have in my visualization. So this will be 180 days, right? Which is a pretty common view of last 6 months. And I get down here, I have like the percent change. So this is kind of what Andy was doing with the percent difference. So I put that in a little highlight table below using these headers as like the labels for that correspond with these dates too, right? So that's nice. This automatically changes, right? So sales last 30 days, we can put, sales last 15 days. So everything kind of dynamically updates. And then we could do week over week. So showing, let's say, the last 13 weeks, right? That's a quarter. Seeing what sales are, week ending. So this also truncates, doesn't show incomplete weeks. So the last complete week ended on 9/16. And so we can see 9/16 here. And it labels it there like, hey, through 9/16. It's not through 9/21, it's 9/16. And then every other week passed along with the percent change. We had a big spike right here. You can see that. Sales last week, and then month to date. So this is a pretty popular one recently. I just had another client ask for this as well. So through the 21st, right? So how did we do through the 21st this year this month compared to the 21st previous month, 21st. And then we get a label here showing sales month to date, letting us know what we're looking at. So yeah, this was a good challenge. It was pretty fun. There's also some background stuff like some filters, to filter out the unfinished periods, whether that's a week or like a month, the unfinished months, and then the date grouping down here to get the actual dates for each one of those periods that happens. Like that's probably the most complicated calculation, was finding that, where that period ends in each month and being able to get that into a label. So, yeah. All right, so any questions? I haven't really checked the chat, but so both these dashboards are on Tableau Public, and I think, Jen, this presentation is going to be recorded and put up on YouTube as well. You can search Madison Tableau User Group. And again, my contact, you can just find me on LinkedIn, Jay Farias, and that's also my Tableau Public. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Jay. Anyone have questions for Jay?
We do have a question in the chat, Jay. The question is, if I have two date fields, say order date and forecast date, and I want to create a dashboard that shows two lines, one for quantity ordered and another for quantity forecast, what would be the time, as some periods would have forecasts with no orders and others would have orders but no forecast?
I think you'd have to get those into one, you'd have to normalize those into one date field, so you have it on the same axis. So same kind of thing where we transposed them. And then you could use your measures would be, quantity ordered and quantity forecast, but you need to get them into the same date axis, the same column for dates to be able to do that. Does that make sense? So I think you could write, so you're saying you don't have, yeah, so this would be into scaffolding too. If you don't have if you have incomplete date ranges, you need to use scaffolding as like a left side of your table and then join in the other ones on the right. And so that you have like a day for every date that you need. So you can Google date scaffolding in Tableau, and there's a bunch of it on that, but you need to do some data model manipulation to achieve what you want.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
Was that helpful? Like, was it too in depth or too complicated or too fast, or any feedback?
I got 2 thumbs up.
It was great.
I got a couple 1 thumbs up. Mostly thumbs up. People seem pretty pleased.
Is anybody currently using that functionality or have used it?
Somewhat.
Somewhat.
Yes.
I wanted to call out something you didn't talk about, but I saw in your last screenshot, which was underneath the chart, was a change, like a heat map that showed, I think, month to month, and it was going up or down, and it was underneath. It was really subtle, and I just barely noticed it. You didn't talk about it, but I don't know if anybody else saw that, because it brought more information to what was happening from month to month. Like, you can see the line, but underneath was the actual values of how much it went up or down percentage wise, and then an indicator. I just thought that was a very cool, subtle feature that was added. Yeah.
So this is a separate chart, right? So I use this for 2 purposes. One, should show the change, and also as like an axis label, right? So it's actually its own, I can bring it out here, but it's its own sheet. But yeah, it's just a nice way to like, you don't want to like, I feel like putting it up here is really cluttering and it's distracting. You put in the tooltip, but you know, down here is just a nice little highlight table that, you know, like you said, you noticed it, but it wasn't like the focal point. It just depends on what the audience is after. But it does kind of isolate, bring that down, and then gives you more space to work with and more functionality than trying to put it all on a label or something like that. So yeah, you have to fiddle a little bit to get the line up right, but once you figure it out, it works out well. And you can use these indicators too. Let me go into this. So formatting. Yeah, so you can do custom formatting here, and you just get these ASCII triangles and then paste them in. And this is anything that's positive, and then this is anything that's negative. You can also do another one in the custom formatting for 0. I don't know if it shows you when you come here. Yeah, I thought I had like a little template of like where stuff is, but there's like a positive slot, a negative slot, and a null slot.
That's a great tip in itself.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Jay. That was awesome. Can we give Jay a round of applause too?
Cool. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. And share properly this time now. Okay, so we are going to take just a brief 10-minute break. But before we do that, I want to give away some stuff, right? I do think we're missing a couple of you in our check-in. I'm not seeing the, so if you didn't check in with Olivia, let's make sure we get you in for our second
Raise your
swag
hand
draw.
that you did not see me at the front. Okay, I got a couple.
All right, Robert, give me a number between 1 and 14.
13.
Scroll to the bottom. Brittany Stricker. Congrats, Brittany. So we have Andy Kriebel's 84 charts in 80 minutes tutorial. It's a, I don't know if it's a PDF or it's, I could deliver it to you electronically, or you're welcome to come to the swag table and grab something.
I'll take his.
Take the book? Okay, I'm going to connect with you and get your email address. All right, give me another number, 1 to 14, that's not 13.
5.
Dan Bollinson, our host. Fantastic. All right, Dan, do you want Andy's tutorial stuff, or do you want to pick something out? Okay. Fabulous. We'll give away some more stuff towards the end of the meeting, but let's take 10 minutes or, well, 7 minutes. Feel free to use the restroom. It's just down the hall through the door to the left. I did set out some water. There's now a pitcher of water if you just want to grab a quick glass of water. There's some cans of sparkling water if you're thirsty. We'll set out the heavy duty snacks after the meeting, but if you're just starving, you can eat your chips quietly. There's some chips out there too.
It's okay. The restroom's behind the front desk. Like, that's what she meant. You go out there, and if you think of the front desk, there's a wall behind that. You use restrooms.
And if you
And there's often
do go
chocolate
use
candy
them,
outside.
you cannot come back in this door.
No,
on the
there's-
left. You
it's
have
not
to
working.
come this way.
Not true. She says it's broken. So it's over.
I came through that. It's all right.
Oh, good.
She said it's broken, so I should use it. So.
Oh, okay. That's new information. Good to know.
And last thing, I don't want to forget over the break, but you asked about how do you know about release notes? This guy named Tableau Tim, who does all these YouTube videos, he's really, really approachable. Every single release, he does a video on the new features, walks through them, demonstrates them. So that's the resource I would point people at. It's just on YouTube, I Google it, but is that the verb? YouTube Tableau Tim, you'll find him, and every single release, he's got, you know, a 10-minute video about features and how to dive into them. I'm Robert, by the way. I was late. Food and everything. Feel free to dig into the swag. We have tons of stuff. I'm just in traffic, so. Didn't get here in time to everything else. There's some water in here. There's some travel modes. There's more shirts. All right, but we have good variety of shirts. What size shirt you? Small. You can get one of our. Okay, then I think these are the random shirts that we have. Okay, great. Different styles. I think. Oh, no, I've got data to the people. Oh, yeah, we got one. So let's see here.
You figured out your size and picture?
Sure. I feel like this happened last time. I got
It did. I have a picture of you with your data here.
No, here's the
Grab her email, like, yeah.
this, but I don't.
Oh, you have one of these? I do. That's okay. I will.
Give it to me.
I'm like you on the sucker.
Oh, yeah, it's a big book of dashboard and it goes from being for the.
Give me a try.
It's just like. Okay, sure. They don't get. Yes, they don't have. So it's a very. They have those.
That's a reference, it's really good. And. Where's the hardware box?
That's right there, the table right there.
Aha. The other box.
Data modeling Tableau.
So then
A good one. Those are more big book dashboards. Yeah.
You know, so we start there.
So.
Here we go.
Little one.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. Only got like a couple. That's like you see the intro. Yeah, it's better when you get off the fire. Feel weird. What else to do? I don't know.
Yeah, okay. We all know you. I don't either, I'm so bad. You've been in meetings with me at Sept, and you're so good. I remember. Are you?
Yeah.
I mean, I.
I stole it, bud. Yeah, totally.
So yeah, you introduced.
No, we have.
No, I did not know that. That's awesome. Small world.
Okay.
You want the Tableau side?
That's Brandis.
Ah, well, I have the big one from from your video.
Yeah.
This is recent.
Okay, okay. So I'm working with her, right? Thanks for asking. Okay.
And then those are the dates. They're supposed
Present.
Yeah.
Okay.
What was I gonna say? Like, I haven't seen him really approach the subject of like.
Okay.
I mean, we kind of started talking, like, we talked about it a little bit, but then.
Yeah. Just go for it.
Let's do it. And then it's go for anything.
You're working.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But it's
Yeah,
really
if
cool.
anything,
It looks really good. I'm
Actually,
very proud of this.
You want to show it?
Well, maybe, but it's kind of like.
I enumerate.
I just don't understand. But like,
change the,
What's the deal? Are we good? Like, are we worried about the data? If we're really identified with the public, are we good there?
Yeah,
Imagination.
no.
I mean.
My first radiation treatment.
Like, it's every day it's from France.
Which means they're gonna go through October 27th. But
So-
they seemed pretty confident that they'd be able to get my treatments in.
I understand.
So that shouldn't impact my availability for October.
So they are kept folder
It
on the.
shouldn't impact my availability for October. The only thing that would impact is the supervisor.
And
I need to bow out of being the host, like just my own investigation.
Yeah.
But-
And we're gonna 60.
Hopefully everything will be fine and it's a minimal evaluation.
Yeah.
Take some progress.
Yeah.
Take some action.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You could do it 9:30.
Yeah.
I will, but it sounds like, it's like, I asked for 8.
Yeah, be sure for the project is already on the server.
Do it, she just had to put it every single day,
So.
do it so I can be done with it
Yeah,
the day.
in terms of the.
I'm gonna let, you know, it all depends, like every day, when you come on the radiology and college, doesn't have anything on. Because it's treatment for every single day, right? So. But she was listening to user complaint. These are just about any problems. I'm hoping that that's. It will turn out.
Sign off.
Yeah.
That's probably what I would do. Is the embed out.
Yeah.
Somebody.
Yeah, exactly, especially if it's gonna make me tired, I'm like.
So you just like
"Well,
she
day,"
enable.
And then feel like I can
Way.
have five.
So that there's no interruption.
No, she can have 5 2. And then at 10 o'clock, I'm gonna be, well, I'll just play games on my phone because I can't sleep right now.
You should have.
So, yeah.
That means to put it on the UAT server. And go from there.
Okay. What's the buffer? Is there a buffer? Maybe I should just email
Yeah.
you.
Well, this
is-
Yeah.
Something like.
Yeah, I've been doing a PhD.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, still doing that.
2 more years ago.
Yeah.
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 PhD.
So
You're
hopefully-
a positive advocate of the mission.
It is.
Yeah,
It
we
is.
may.
Maybe that.
So hopefully.
It is.
Too much of a disruptive in your life tomorrow.
We're not going anywhere.
Maybe mass communication. maybe
Yeah.
some health
Yeah, the Dane
communication,
County Sheriff was like,
communication.
the area, don't be in the area.
Yeah. Trying. And then I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're saying like triple the size, like triple the size of the town, right?
Yeah. Thousand pixels wide, absolute max, no matter where it's going. But I told her twice, so she's going on maybe pixels. It's so it's technically you can cut that out.
Well, I mean, I can take where they wanted to. Some of it is.
We are restarting our last session of the day here.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. Yeah.
No.
Okay, so the next. You can gesture nicely. So our last session here, well, we have a few wrap-up things, some fun stuff to do with you all, but the last presentation session we're gonna have today is gonna be, I guess, a little bit more of a thinking, so not just having information presented at you, but let's think a little bit about what it means to show time series, different ways that it can be done, some creative ways it can be done. It's not all just line charts and bar charts, so that's what the session's about. But before I give you a bunch of examples, and again, I'm Jen Shepard, one of the leadership team members. Hopefully you all have met me at some point. If you haven't, please come say hi at the break. But we also have a special guest for this portion as well. So Dinushki De Livera is going to present one of her vises that relates to time series on the Ohio River. So I should have made sure she's, Dinushki, I hope you're with us here at the moment.
I'm here. Hi.
So I'm just going to introduce you a little bit more here. So she's a business analyst on the business intelligence team at Unifund. And she also is with Recovery Decision Science. So she is a Tableau social ambassador, been using Tableau for 7 years. She recently won the Women in Analytics Data Visualization Contest in 2018 and also got Biz of the Year and the Tableau Wannabe Podcast in 2019, awarded at conference. So her Firebird visualization was on the short list for the 2019 Kantar Information is Beautiful Awards. You've probably seen some of her work. She does really awesome work. You didn't mention her data there, Dinushki, but I will mention it.
I'm sorry. I have a co-founder of a group called Her Data as well. And we highlight, people that do amazing Tableau work or cool Tableau work. And even though it's called Her Data, we don't exclude anyone, but we shine a little extra glitter on the ladies.
Excellent. All right, well, let's see your viz. We're excited to see it.
Okay. So let me share my screen. Oh, sorry. You'd think by now I'd be able to do this. There we go. Okay, can you see my screen?
There it is. Yep.
Okay. So hi everyone, I'm Dinushki De Livera. I have done some Tableau public work. I am not proud to say that I haven't done any in a long time, but today Jen asked me to present a viz that I did a long time ago in 2018. It was for one of the IronViz feeder rounds, one of the initial rounds, and the topic was water. And while I was brainstorming on what the heck I would do on this topic, one of my coworkers, Ethan Hahn, was telling me about how he has been collecting data on the height of the Ohio River for many, many years. So, and he hadn't really done anything with the data. So obviously I jumped on the opportunity to ask him for the data. He even, it is public data from this waterweather.gov website, but the data stops around 2000 and something. So he even went to the extent of reaching out to them and asking them for data past the date that was available online, and they were so kind enough to give it to him. So he has 2 Google Sheets now with over 800,000 rows of data on the height of the Ohio River. So I'm thankful for it. So I, don't give him a hard time about it. So again, there are lots of things that I would do differently about this dashboard now, but I like it. Even going back and looking at it now, I feel like I took a lot of initiation on this, apart from, of course, the data being readily available for me. But it was really exciting to look, because I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, so the river passes through our city. And we actually went out and looked at, the times when the river was a certain height, and some landmarks that have some distinguishing stains and whatnot from the floods. So it was really like a whole thing. So in terms of time series, it's not super obvious when you look at it directly. So I'm going to go to Tableau quickly. So these dots, or the idea was to make it like raindrops, so giving that feel of water and a feel of flow, is actually in a time series format. So I can just show my axis here. So you can see that the data is going from 1990 to 2018. Ethan actually just shared with me the updated Google Sheet. So now that I'm revisiting this viz, I will be updating it and sharing it back on Tableau Public. So you can see that each of these dots represent the maximum height of the river every single day since 1990 to 2018. There are some little sparses, but very few. So you can see that the bulk of the days have the height around 26 feet. And this height is measured from the riverbed. But then it does, stretch out to the 50 feet and so on. And once it reaches 52 feet and onward to around 55 feet, it is considered a minor flood. And once it passes the 55 feet mark, it is considered a major flood. So I thought it was, instead of, let me just dissect this a little bit and show you a line chart, which is awful. But if we put this date here and only pick a certain year, and we not fix the axis, you can see a very typical time series line chart. So instead of showing a typical line chart, I wanted to add a little bit of flair, which is why I added every little single dot to make it give it more of a water flow feel. So I'm simply adding a color category to distinguish the different, whether it's a minor flood or a major flood. And I did add this little glow to enhance the minor flood and major flood, but also wanted to give it like this little bit of like a ripple effect. And that is simply done by doing a dual axis and increasing the size of those dots and playing with the opacity. So there are lots of way cooler ways to do this now, using glow shapes and whatnot. There's a beautiful group of shapes that Sarah Battersby put out a couple of years ago with, giving a nice glow. But in 2018, I didn't, well, I'm sure it was out in 2018 maybe, but I didn't know better. And I thought this did the job just fine. So that is the time series aspect of it. I also have a little line chart for the years that there was a flood, to, just to show what the river was like throughout the year, and then when it did have the flooding. I have a little legend here just to let people know what they should do when they see these icons. I would probably do something a little niftier now. But this is where, I kind of really got into it, where I did a lot of research and found, a bunch of articles about really interesting facts about these floods, and got very much into the weeds of it. Ethan actually also had some pictures of what Cincinnati, the Serpentine Wall, looked like during the 2005 flood. And I wanted to kind of compare what it looks like on a regular day. So me and my husband went out and took some pictures of the now versus the flood. And the same exact spot was that it was, again, one of the spots that we looked at. Oh, not in this year, but there was another year that I think it was 2015, where the Serpentine Wall was even more flooded. And then these are a couple of, other pictures. Oh, here you can see that you can't even, see the line of the steps anymore in the 2015 flood. And then this was really bad. Like that's a whole bench that someone can sit on, and it's completely flooded. And I was actually here in 2018, so I got to kind of experience this flood too, which was a little bizarre. So that is my take on the flooding of the Ohio River, and kind of putting it into a time series aspect. It's not a crazy viz that included a lot of crazy calculations or anything. It's super, super simple. And, it was in this time where I was using floating a lot. Almost every little bit of this viz is floating components, which I'm not ashamed of. I'll own it. But yeah, I would definitely things I would do differently now looking at it, but I still like it.
I still think it's really cool. I was looking for time series charts to share with this meeting and someone to present them. And I saw that one, and I just loved how that kind of back and forth on the left, it reminded me of a river, right? You've got the low flow, you've got the higher flow with the flood. It just keeps going back and forth like that. And I thought the little glow you put on the flood areas just really drew your attention to them, but not in an overwhelming way, just in a, whoa, there was an incident here. I thought that was really well done. Did you all like that one too? Yeah, and I like that it's simple, right? Because there are lots of amazing creations on Tableau Public. You've done some of them that I think that's incredible. I'm never going to be able to use that in my work. And this one that you did there, that could be used in a lot of different ways. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's great. Any questions? Yes, we have a question for you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that to us. You mentioned that, and I'm not sure if you were talking about the photos, but you mentioned that maybe you would do something differently now, but integrating the photos with the data is super, super cool. Do you have any ideas of like how if you were going to do that differently?
So I am integrating the photos with the data using background images. So, that is quite an old technique. Now we have background layers and map layers and whatnot. So I might, go that route. Or even, I'm thinking about it now as we're talking and brainstorming, even if it was on the dot, if I put a little image on the dots where the flooding is happening, that might have been cooler. But yeah, I think I'm a very, very last minute person. I think Jen might know this just due to setting up this call with me. But I was definitely on a time crunch. So I was, hurrying up and doing stuff. But yeah, does that help? I would love any ideas if you guys have any too.
I think they liked it as is.
Okay.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Have a good meeting.
All right, and now I promised you a bunch of other examples. Let's get to it. Actually, before we do that, Dan, do you by chance know how if we could turn just these first lights off? I feel like some of these vizzes are.
Oh, yeah, it was cleared, yeah.
No,
I can try.
I pushed some buttons and nothing really happened. We'll see what we can do about that. Otherwise, I'm gonna be sending out these slides to you all or providing these slides afterward. If you see something you think is really awesome, I encourage you, I put the links in all of them. It's clickable. You can go take a closer look. But I wanted to start with this one because I might have gasped out loud when I first saw this biz on Tableau Public. Because probably all of us who've ever dealt with time series have built a line chart. Maybe you've even built a bar chart. Have you thought to put a bar with or behind the line? Oh, that's okay. That mood lighting. Have you ever thought to put bars behind your line to be your color pop of where something is happening? I had never thought to do that. And I thought that was so effective in this biz because you've got those white trend lines, but then that color palette of the bars behind it really draws your attention to those high peaks. And I thought this was super cool. I also like that it's trellis format where you've got each of these different countries. So you can kind of see a country's pattern. You can also compare the countries to each other. I thought that was pretty awesome. What do you guys think of this one? Do you find that to be effective or is it too much?
I like it.
Really? You guys aren't just like, oh, it's so beautiful. I loved this chart. Just it's an all right.
I like it, really
Like it, yeah. I haven't yet figured out where to use this in my life, but I think I will find a way because I thought that was really cool. Any other thoughts about this one? Do you see anything here that's not really working for you?
It's like a tiny Tableau issue that I have, which is that the legend, the color legend at the bottom, it just drives me kind of crazy that they don't just round it like 0 to 30. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I always end up doing some sort of crazy manipulation so that I get it to be a nice round number instead of like 1.19%. Like
That's very precise. Okay. Any other thoughts about this one? Well, I liked it. So someday there will be a chart I make that looks something like this. Okay. Next one I wanted to share with you because so often when we talk about time and build things related to time, I think so many of us think left to right, linearly. And yeah, that does make sense for some ways of looking at time. But I loved that Agatha took this calendar year. So here we're looking at when babies are born by this one's by hour. She's got a bunch of different business on here. And make it a circle because then it's like a clock and it's like the time going around. And I think it makes those peaks, you don't even really have to hover. You can to get those specific values, but you can probably guess. I mean, she labeled it here, but I think you could kind of guess where things were once you know where one time point is because you have a general sense of how the clock works. And you can't really do that as easily with lines. So I thought this was a really effective way of looking at time as a circle, which I think more of us should do. Let me just open up the real biz here because there's a lot more to it than that. So the top part of the biz is what I was just showing you. Please work, Tableau.
Hard to take at least a couple of minutes.
It
to
does,
think about
yeah,
it.
right?
Yeah.
This is why I put screenshots of everything. Tableau Public was down entirely, I think 2 days ago, and I was sweating it that it's not working now. They might still be having some technical difficulties.
Try to hit Control F5. Fun fact, that's a cache clear refresh from browser tabs.
Thanks, Olivia. Pro tip.
It may not work.
See?
Sometimes it does.
All right, well, good thing I have the, this is frozen. Lost my, there we go. Well, I was hoping to show you the whole thing. There's other views, so some of it is hour. I think she does day of the year. There's a couple other things too, but they all have this circle shape, which I thought was pretty effective. What do you all think of that? Do you ever visualize time as a circle?
Want to now that I've seen that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Great. Yeah.
I love this, but I hate that noon is like at 7 p.m. What is noon doing at 7?
I don't know that either. I would change that personally as well. Yeah, and align it with how we normally think of the clock. I don't know. Maybe if we hovered, that we're able to hover over the real one, we'd get some details.
I'm like wondering if, so what time is like the really hot spot? That's gotta be like 9 maybe, or something.
It's the South Hemisphere clock. It's backwards.
Hold on, I'm trying.
These are gonna have to be unanswered questions, I think.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Telepublic appears to be a touch glitchy
Oh,
today.
yes, it's loading on mine.
Well, that's unfair.
I am gonna share my
Could you
screen.
at least tell us what the peak is? Oh, you can share your screen,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I don't know why, guys, today, for some reason, technology does not hate me. It's not Jen's fault. I just jinxed everything.
Okay, what's that peak then?
Hold on.
Oh, it did look like it just skewed it in the screenshot or something, doesn't it?
Yeah, maybe.
8:05 AM.
How can you-
Yeah,
Shift starts, baby born. And then if you mind scrolling down just a touch, just to give a taste of some of the other things that are in there.
ooh, pretty.
Oh, so different types of births, right? That's pretty fascinating. Look at C-section. I'm glad you were able to bring this
Yeah,
up, because
eliminate.
this is part of what really fascinated me about this is that was my first question, right? Well, does it matter the type of birth or not? And it absolutely does. No question. You don't need the precision of the value. You can tell just from looking at these 3 circles side by side, there's a tremendous amount of difference as to whether it's an induced birth, a natural birth, or a C-section.
It's gotta do something with scheduling, right?
8:05.
Something.
Anything, yeah, maybe scroll just a touch more and then.
I think the natural shows how random it is, so it's distributed evenly.
Yeah.
Ooh,
That's cool.
Day of the week. Not so many on the weekends.
What's the inside
Problem-
circle?
What's that?
What is the inside circle?
day.
Oh, that's
Day of the week. Yeah, we're looking at day of the week here.
Oh, sorry, I could probably zoom in a tad too. That might help.
Oh, and the radio bars are still time.
Yeah. Yep.
That's cool. Look.
I would imagine it's combined with C-sections. Doesn't specify. Somebody wanted to every weekend.
I think we still see the effect of C-sections there, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
No doctors on the weekends.
And then you might have seen those birthday heat maps. Those birthday heat maps where the holidays are much less likely to have babies born. It's a little bit lower yet. So I've seen that a few people do vises like that. So she, instead of heat map form, actually did this one in a linear timeline, which I actually really like the heat map for this. But you do definitely see those low lows where we have those holidays. So fascinating topic, and I thought it was just a really cool way to view this that you might not have thought of. I don't usually jump to circle either, but it's absolutely a valid way to look at time, especially if you're talking about hours of the day or days of a year, something that's cyclical like that. So we'll see a few more that are more non-standard. Hopefully, the public will cooperate with me. We shall see. Okay. How about a flow diagram? You think of time as flowing? Yeah, it can, right? So this one is just a little snippet of a bigger view, looking at the main Star Wars characters, how much time they spend on screen. Oh, good, this one loads. It was just hers. How much time the characters spend on screen and how that changes over the course of all of the movies in the series. So you can see some characters are in there pretty regularly. Some come in at a later movie. Some have a big role to play in the, what do you call the previews, the older ones, and then others have a bigger role to play in the middle. And I just thought it was a really neat way to convey that, because you get a lot of information in there. And of course, the interactivity part makes that really, who's your favorite character? Let's pick someone. Owen has a Star Wars favorite?
Oda.
That's listed.
All right, well, Prince of Leia. So if you click on one of the characters, then it will highlight that character's map so you can more easily see where they are. So she's not in the beginning at all, starts to rise, and in terms of ranking, and then plays much less of a role in the later movies. So you could do that with any of the characters. But I thought this was, again, just a really original way of showing that relative contribution and also how that changes over time for each of these different characters. What do you guys think of this one?
Like, I'm not a Star Wars fan, but.
Wow.
I like it. I mean, it's kind of cool.
Is it sorted by the beginning? Okay, accurate screen. No, I know. I'm just trying to figure out in terms of order then, like, are you saying like Darth Vader must be really important? That's why he's on top, like, because he showed up a lot. So like at the very beginning, you're already tracking like who is priority in the beginning.
I think, yeah, I think each set of movies is sorted most time to least.
Okay.
But then their flow changes from that point on. So it starts with a sort and then the sort gets a little out of order because they flip and flop. Was there a comment over here?
Oh, just, yeah, I think there is something about like, it did take, like, it takes a while to kind of map all of the stuff, but that's what happens when there's just so many things, but maybe a little bit more of a clear label about them, like the topper, the higher up the character, the more important. But also I do feel a little bit sad that Darth Vader kind of like fades out. At least he kind of comes back.
Sorry for Darth Vader.
Yeah.
I'm also surprised Yoda has such little screen time.
Oh, yeah. For being such a memorable little character of the franchise, really doesn't.
It feels like,
Yeah.
you know, him and R2 should be at the top. But I wonder about mentions too. Like, people talk about Yoda. Yeah. I guess I only bring up like possible bias that exists from like, oh, Darth Vader, very important. Because he like has a whole bunch of screen time in the beginning.
Is it actually rank of
Good point.
importance or is it number of appearances or
It's
amount?
number of appearances, but I guess I'm saying like, because we typically read left to right,
Mhm.
like you are setting a precedent of like, he must be
Starting
very
with that.
important.
Mhm. Well, to be fair, actually, there's a cheat there. It's two characters, right? It's Anakin Skywalker becomes Darth Vader.
Correct. Yeah, I get that.
And Yoda died, so
Ah,
that's why.
his ghost, his
In a way.
mentions.
I think it's cool.
Well, maybe something for you to consider if you're showing contributions over time and how those might change. Scotty?
Yeah, I have a quick comment and ask for people. I think, so these type of graphs, I don't know if this is like an area line graph or what, but like these type of graphs for me are just like really confusing, you know? And I'm wondering first, like what is this called? And also have people found like, you know, data or like specific intent for like a visualization where this really, they think works well?
I think it's called a stream diagram or flow diagram.
Sankey, Sankey, or a Sankey only two.
It's not going, I'm not so sure of that though. It's not going in from one group into a different. I don't think it is a Sankey. The Sankey would be your category A over here and your category C over here. How has your trajectory changed? This isn't that. I don't think it. Oh, we have some debate over what. Has anyone had a need? I have definitely had need for Sankeys. This particular chart, I have not thought of a use case yet. And others?
Actually, so we used a Sankey for doing like gross revenue down to like net, basically to like take stuff out, and that was cool. But I think just like stuff like this where there's like 20 characters, you know, there's like a lot of lines, like like for me, I think most of the time I want somebody to like look at it and kind of know what's going on in the first like 30 seconds, you know. But yeah, I don't know, have people use these?
We've done it with channel flow for online retail. So seeing where they came in first, like paid search and then organic or direct. So you
Okay.
can kind of see if they have learned behavior over time.
Okay.
Stop making us pay for them on our website type thing for our best customer, but we've done that.
Okay.
I think it might be a ribbon too.
Ribbon chart.
Is another option, throwing that out there.
Some charts go by many names. This one caught my attention. This was a visit the day, 2 months ago, let's say. And it's looking at a measurement in this case, the depth of the sea ice, but it is also over time. And I really liked how we drew attention to where this gap is. So let's see if this one opens up. So the dots are sized. The dots are colored and sized. So it was harder to see in the screenshot. It may be hard to see on the screen. There are actually dots in the gap. They're just smaller and lighter in color because the thickness was so small there. And I'd be interested in her design choice of where to draw this line. I think it was kind of not arbitrary exactly. I think she's made a judgment call of where the difference was enough to draw that. So you could certainly do this without the line. I think that helps make it even more noticeable where you've got these really low points or thin areas. But then you've got, so now you can see the legend. So you've got the years down here. So up here is 1980, all the way down to 2023. And then you've got the different weeks of the year. So week 1, week 2. So you're covering a lot of history in here. But since each dot or each time point is the same size and shape, you can put a lot of data in a small amount of space. What do y'all think of this one? Specific to time series, I should say. Do you find this effective way to give you a sense of what's happening over time? Like you're all just
I
pondering.
feel like I still don't get it.
Yeah.
Let's pick a couple points. So these bigger circles that are the darker blue up here in the left. So this is the winter time, right? We've got January, and this is older, longer ago. So the depth here was greater in the same part of the year than it was in more recent years in the same part of the year. So you can compare part of year across years. So that's vertical. But you can also compare within a year. So over the year, it's thicker in the winter, thinner in the summer, pretty much non-existent in the fall. It starts to thicken up again. But over time, it hasn't stayed thick for as long and it hasn't thickened as quickly. And so we've got this gap over the years growing wider and wider and wider, where it hasn't been as thick for a more extensive period of time. So that's what I think that jagged line is drawing attention to, is this period in the year over time where there isn't as much ice. So does that help? Do you like this then? Or do you feel like, no, I should have been able to answer that right away, therefore it's not effective?
Once you understand it, it's really,
Yeah.
but yeah, a little bit of thought of effort.
For those of you who were here in our June meeting, Robert and I did a session about talking through some vizzes and what makes for a good viz. And it kind of depends on your goal, right? So if your goal is to get people's attention and make them want to say, wow, I would love to understand this. What is happening here? And this does that, or at least it did for me. So in that sense, it's successful. If your job is business insight within 30 seconds or less, no one needs to ask me a single question, probably not. So it really depends on your goal here. Yeah.
Has anyone done anything with animation? Because I feel like we've talked all day about time series and that hasn't come up yet. I'm just curious if that's
It's like a bar chart based kind of animation or even more sophisticated.
where it like actually walks through
Yeah.
how the data's
Sure.
changing over
Yeah.
time.
I did a competitor analysis, so like mentions of competitors and like whether it's growing, like in cool. Cool to watch. Like there's nothing dynamic about it aside from it, like
Here you go.
here's a bubble that gets bigger.
I think the key to that is you're representing time not in one view, but rather you're paging it by year. Is that what you're talking about? So as you cycle through the years, it moves along and shows you where things move. Is that?
You mean like where you can press the play button and it
Yeah.
like play
Yeah.
your animation?
I always think about Tristan's from Iron Biz back in 2017. I'm pretty sure that's why he won Iron Biz.
It was a good use of animation.
Yeah, it was great. We don't use it a lot because it's resource intensive and we're on a shared server and we're designing for the public and it's not particularly user friendly for non-data audiences. I get very confused why things start moving when they didn't click anything. You know, imagine serving as tech support for your grandmother with the animation. So anyway, I think that they're fun. We don't tend to use them a lot.
All right, it's gonna show you a couple more and then we'll get to our last part of the meeting here. So this one is a very recent viz that Christian Felix did. He was plotting the temperatures where he lives in Phoenix. Similar idea of a dot is representing a point in time, but here we've got these different temps. I'll just quickly pop over to the public view. Work. And yes, it did. So you've got similar, well, I mean, that kind of story, but I think, my gosh, sorry, I'm going the wrong way here. What is happening? Apologies. Okay, so you've got these bands that represent the different temperature levels. So the part furthest out on the chart where the yellow dots are, that's over 110 degrees. So you can get a sense of, is that happening more frequently? So this is 2023. This back here is 1986. So we've got time. This going not the full circle, but kind of this arc of time. So you get a sense of how this has been evolving. Now, maybe if he gets another 100 years of data, he'll come all the way around full circle. I'm not sure, but what do you think of this one? Does it draw your attention? Do you get the time feel of it?
I actually feel like this might have been better with an animation.
She was trying to simulate that.
Reveal like 1 year at a time, or each year
Yeah.
it fills in.
Yeah,
Hmm.
because then you could see the shift in colors a
Yeah.
little bit easier.
You're right about.
We'll just quickly go through just these last couple, because like I said, I'll share this out so you can look this over. This is one that Lindsay Betzendahl did, looking at when the flu hits. And so kind of like the ice, there's times of year where you expect more flu, there is more flu. You all probably could have guessed and gotten 100% on the quiz if I said, which season does that usually happen in? Yeah, it's usually winter. And then we had this really crazy year of H1N1, which she annotated, where the flu started way back here, and there were incidents of it throughout pretty much the entire year. So that year really stands out. The interactive version is even better because I love these layered area charts, which I think show that really nicely. But here's another way of thinking of data as cyclical, the cycle, so that taking up the full year, the full time. Just quick thumbs up or down. You guys like this one? Yeah, I like this one a lot too. This one you really got to dig into a little bit. I'll let you do that on your own. This is looking at journalists who were killed and in which countries that happened in, how many of them happened in a time period. This is just a piece of the viz. I will show you that one because it's kind of amazing. She does have a legend because that would be too hard to understand otherwise. But what draws my attention right away is just the tremendous variability in these patterns. Well, this one's not going to work, is it? Tremendous variability in these patterns. There's some countries, there's maybe a death or two. And then there's a country where it's this tight spiral, this thick, tight spiral, death after death after death. And it's really impactful, I think. Don't usually think of time in these little spirals, but it also was an interesting way, interesting way as a small multiple to be able to show you all this information for all these different countries and fit it on one dashboard. Imagine if this was in any other type of format, like a trend line. I think it would be much harder to see the lines if you've got, I think she has something like 50 countries on there. It'd be much harder to see that there. Not necessarily saying it's the most effective way, but it's an interesting way of doing it. And I'll love for you guys to go take a look at that and give some thought as to whether this conveys the point better than another way of showing time, or does this make it more confusing? Yeah, here's one country. You kind of see the big spiral versus a dot here and there. It also starts to look constellation-like, which is kind of cool. And then I just want to end with a couple of simple ones. So I've shown you some more complex things. You might be thinking, yeah, that's really beautiful and really cool, but I'm not going to be able to build that at work. It doesn't have to be complicated. So I thought this was really well done. Ravi took data from various points around his city, London, I think it was, where he had data from before COVID hit and after, and then he plotted it for these different sectors and showed just the impact in people's movements for certain types of places. So grocery and pharmacy there's a lot less movement to those places after the lockdown. And so I don't know if you can see it very well, but he's got all the data points and very faint behind it, but he's got kind of that trend line with the stepwise black. So you could really get the gist, but then you could also drill into the specifics. So I thought that was really cool. This is just one piece of the viz, but we'll move on. Andy did show a stacked bar. I think it's really typical for us to think timeline, line chart. If you've got multiple groups, you show multiple lines. I think that's at least most of the people I see when they're starting out in Tableau, that's their go-to. But look how effective it can be instead to do that as bars when you've got a nice story like this one. So here we've got different groups of people and it's the different levels of education. So I think I forget which is college. I think the brown on the bottom is bachelor's degree or something like that. The blue at the top is 8th grade or less education, and then the other levels in between. And so because there's this really, really clear change in this pattern over time, I think showing it in the stacked bar format is really effective because you can look at any one segment and it's not really the point to see how does this length of segment compare to this one. It's how has this pattern evolved and it's changed dramatically. And so I really like that. Do you guys like that too? Imagine this could have been, what is that, 6 groups over all these years. You could have done that as 6 lines on a line chart, right? But look how much more effective I think this is at showing that story.
I use something exactly like that for one of my business dashboards that shows our executives the number. So I work for a telecom. So the number of service locations that we serve with fiber versus copper. And so we've been overbuilding with fiber everywhere. So the fiber just keeps growing and the copper just keeps shrinking.
Yeah, that sounds like a perfect story for this kind of view. And if you want to still add a little prettiness, a little flair, and you've got some data that is very cyclical. So this is a view, there's a couple different views of it. There's temperature, this is humidity. These are just bars. These are just bars over time. It's still horizontal, but the difference here is that because they're so small and there's so many of them, it's almost like you're stepping way back and looking at the picture from a far distance instead of, zooming into a particular year. I think it really shows the pattern of there's this lull here in the early spring where there just isn't that much humidity. And it's a little bit lower over here and you've got these peaks. And there's a ton of data in here. And yet you could get that big picture, that overall story really quickly while also being able to see some differences and nuances. Like, did anyone notice this dot here? Measurement error, who knows? But things like that can really stand out when you've got a chart like this. So a beautiful color palette, a bunch of bars, and you've got yourself an interesting time series. And then last thing I just wanted to mention is we will, as I said, share these slides. There's a lot of resources out there related to time series. So one I found really helpful, Andy has the 84 charts. We're giving away some of those, but Adam Crayon also put out a resource that talks about what to do when your data is incomplete. And he's got several examples and walks through how to do those. So that's great. There are several date calculation cheat sheet. If you go to Tableau Public and put in date calculation cheat sheet, you'll get several. The Flurlages do amazing work, so I really like theirs, but there are a few of those. So there are definitely resources out there for how to build things. It's the part of, but what's the best view for my data? That's the hard part. So hopefully you've got some inspiration for that today and some new ways of thinking about what do you do with your time series. And with that, I want to learn a little bit from all of you. This is the last part of our meeting here. So if you came to our June meeting, we kicked off what we're thinking of as a new series. In June, we talked about distribution data. We had Kevin Wee talk about the data he had that looked at B-swarm plots and box plots and various ways of showing distribution. Today was obviously all about time series. We were intending to keep continuing this, and every meeting we would feature a new type of chart. So maybe it would be some sort of flow diagrams or Sankey's or something. But before we get too far down this road, we want to ask you, do you like that idea? Has it been helpful for us to really dig in on a certain type of chart? So if you like that idea, raise your hand or stand up. If you don't, stay seated. In fact, that might be universal. All right, nailing it. We got this. Great. Okay. Second question. So today's meeting, not only did we talk about a particular chart type, we made the whole meeting about that chart type. So we want to know, is that going a little bit too far? Too much of the same thing? Or do you like this idea of a themed meeting where everything in the meeting ties into the same general topic? If you love the themed, all themed, raise your hand or stand up. If you don't, stay seated. Okay, that's a little bit more mixed. A little bit more mixed, mostly yeses though. Okay, and then a big one. So we're so glad you're here, but you may have noticed attendance is a little bit light compared to what it has been in years past. And we're not quite sure what to attribute that to. So we're thinking of experimenting with having at least some of our meetings be virtual during the year, maybe even our next meeting. We're assuming you're here because you like to be in person, but maybe you're thinking, boy, if you gave me a virtual option, I would be home right now. So we want to know from you. If you think you'd like to have at least some meetings or most meetings be in person, stand up or raise your hand. If you would really wish we would switch to virtual.
Oh, wait, there's no hybrid option?
Let's say there's not for now. All right, so raise hand for in person or stand up. The people here mostly, but it looks like some of you at least would appreciate a virtual. Okay, we will take that under advisement. The reason we don't want to jump into hybrid is it's twice as much work for us. Really, we got to get a venue, we got to get food. We don't know who's coming and who's not. We also have to get the technology. It sort of works, but it's a lot. And then we're afraid that people will sign up, we'll prepare for them to be there, and then the day of, they'll be like, you know what, never mind, I'm staying home. And now here, the three of us are by ourselves in a room with 2 people and a whole bunch of food. So that's the risk of trying hybrid. But you may be able to convince me if you have compelling arguments.
Well, I was thinking about like one in-person virtual, like on-off. Something back and forth, I don't know.
Yeah, we've kicked that idea around a little bit too. Maybe we do 2 in person, 2 virtual, or 3 in 1, and then just have like a networking, no content, just come hang out with your data fam. Maybe we would do something like that. So we'll consider it. Great, thank you for that. Couple more questions for you. We have thought it might be kind of fun if we were to gather a bunch of data viz related books, or maybe we'll just call them data related books, and we would help you all have access to those through a lending library. So we'd help organize it. We might have some sort of checkout system. You could contribute books if you had something you've already read. You could get it back later if you needed to. And you could come to these meetings, check out a book, take it home, read it, get some value out of it, bring it back the next meeting, or renew it if you need to. And that way we don't all have to buy all of the books all of the time. We would have crowd sharing of these different resources that could be really useful to us. Is that something that you think would be useful and you would probably take advantage of that if we did something along those lines?
Yes.
Yes. Enough yeses. Do any of you think you would have something you could contribute?
Yes.
Okay, great. Because we obviously can't purchase all these books ourselves. We do have some in our personal collections we'd be willing to put in there. Maybe we could buy some, but if you all could help it be a community library, that would be great. Okay, maybe we'll get that started in 2024 then. All right, and we just wanted to make sure you were aware of a few things. So the Wisconsin Tug is always a virtual meeting. That one's coming up on October 19th. The link we can share out with you later. There's some great presentations there, including how to build data viz with crochet. Are you intrigued? I think that's pretty funny. Milwaukee is always in November. They have not told us their date yet, but keep an eye out for that if you're interested. And our next meeting will be in December. We may do virtual, we'll see, or we'll find a spot and let you know. You can always find out when our next events are by going to our user group page. I have to put in this plug, this friendly reminder. So we switched to our new system, Salesforce/Tableau switches to our new system. I don't know when that was, let's say April. And you all signed up to be part of that group, which is how you hear about our events. And whenever we send you an email, there's a little link at the bottom that says unsubscribe. And it's made me so sad that every time we send you an email, a handful of people click that unsubscribe button to never hear from us again. And so we don't know if they really never want to hear from us again, or if they don't realize that that's what they're doing. So I'm telling all of you, if you want to keep hearing from us and you want to come to our meetings, do not click the unsubscribe button or you'll never get our emails again. And if you could spread the word to your coworkers, that would be great. It seems to be a common problem, so we're not taking it super personally, but it does make us sad when people say they don't want to get our emails anymore. We do not bombard you. Yeah.
What we think is people are saying, like, I'm going to RSVP as a no, but they're hitting unsubscribe, not realizing it pulls them out of the mailing list completely. To not RSVP, you simply don't RSVP.
Right. Yeah.
So
it's unsubscribe from everything ever in the future, as opposed to I don't need to hear about this event again. Big difference. So if you can help us with that, and if you intended to unsubscribe, well, now I just told you how to do it. If you don't intend to, don't hit the button. And then a request. We do a lot of talking up here. We were very excited to get a bunch of speakers for you to hear some different voices and see some different faces. And we like to show off the community, but we would love to hear from you. You guys are that's 2 words, that's not too sublime. You're our members. And so we would love to hear what you're working on. We'd love to hear a problem you overcame. We'd love to hear some inspiration you had and a vision you made. So if you're interested, it doesn't have to be an hour-long thing. It could be 15 minutes. If you're at all interested in that, please come talk to one of us. We would love to have you at any of our future meetings. Also, if you were here in June, you know that our founder of this TUG, Pat McCormick, has moved on to other things in his life. And so we're down some leadership team members. So if you think you love organizing events and you want to be part of that and help us out, we could use some more support. So please come talk to us about that too, if you're at all interested. And we have to thank our fabulous hosts for today. So the space generously provided by Baker Tilly, great space. We really appreciated it. In fact, Dan, you want to come say a little bit about your organization and your work? This is Dan.
Yeah, here. Hi, everyone. I've met many of you, but it's a very, very happy to host. I know the Wi-Fi was a pain. I apologize for that. I think I spoke a couple of months ago on Tableau extensions with just Python. And so that's a really big area for us right now. And if anyone in here is a Python user or is interested in doing more with their dashboards using extensions, please come talk to me. I'd love to talk more about that. And be more than happy to sort of get people over the learning curve on that. So please reach out, and that goes to folks online too, if you can hear me. But yeah, I'm glad everyone was able to make it, and
Yeah, thank you so much. We couldn't do this without people like you and your organization being able to host us. So thank you so much.